Per prima cosa un piccolo ringraziamento in italiano alle istituzioni che mi hanno così gentilmente invitata e sollecitata a venire in questo periodo così difficile. Sono loro molto grata anche per aver insistito cercando di convincermi e di superare le mie piccole paure, perché l'occasione è veramente molto interessante, coinvolgente e gli argomenti che suscitano anche le presentazioni che ho sentito prima di me sono molto, lasceranno nelle mie memorie molte cose da ricercare ancora. So let's go to Florence now, and I will present a special case of a grotesque cycle, and this grotesque cycle is painted in a very famous place, the Galleria degli Uffizi. And the fame of the museum has overshadowed that of the frescoes. If you have been to the Galleria, you just remember the corridor when you enter, it's the frescoes that are all over your head in the vaults. So these frescoes are either too little known despite their size and their relevance for the quality of the executions, the importance of the building, and the prestige of their patron, the Grand Duke Francesco I dei Medici. At the time in which the vaults were frescoed in 1581, the gallery did not exist. It was called the Corridore. It was a part of this pathway that linked Palazzo Pitti to Palazzo Vecchio. You can see the road. So this is Palazzo Pitti, Palazzo Vecchio, and this is the gallery, and the fresco cycle is here. Vasari built this corridor for the marriage of Francesco I with Joan of Austria in 1566 to connect to the two palaces by crossing the Arno on the Ponte Vecchio. Through such a corridor, the prince, his family, the court, they could go up and down without walking in the roads. So it was a very important link. And the eastern part of the corridor, this is why it is called Corridoio di Levante, eastern corridor, was a domestic place frequented by the prince, his families, and the court, which constituted an expansion of the two noble palaces to which it served as a link. So we are speaking about this very long corridor, about 150 meters, and the gallery rooms are around here behind. Grotesque painting, this is what the cycle is about, stemmed from the imitation of ancient decorative motifs, which were believed to have been originally located mostly in underground settings. That's why the name grotesque from grotto, grotta. These decorations had been found for the first time in Rome in the buried ruins of the Domus Aurea at the end of the 15th century and had given birth to a new genre of painting that imitated their features. Ancient grotesques were copied and reproduced by many artists, and the most famous of them is, of course, Raphael, with his workshop and their decoration of the Vatican loggias. The characteristics of the grotesque painting is the flexibility of their decorative structures and pattern, consisting of plant, racemes, fine and slender architectural elevations, and small fantastic figures, which made the ideal fabric to link the depictions of historical, mythological, and allegorical subjects. As far as the execution of the frescoes are concerned, they were made, of course, in 1581. There are two workshops working. The most important one is the workshop by Alessandro Allori and his collaborators. And there is another painter and his workshop, that is Antonio Tempesta. They have a very different stylistic language, but I can't. Of course, this subject is very wide because it's being such a wide cycle. So I just have to give you some data, and I can't go further on this matter. And the decorations extend over 46 bays, marked by they have a rhythm of 3+1, so 3 vaults, 3 big vaults, and a coffered ceiling. And this module is repeated 11 times. And the cycle is one of the rare instances. It ends with, yes, where you have the pink dot, that is the end. It ends with this very big cross vault where the emblems and coat of arms of the Grand Duke Francesco and his second wife, Bianca Cappello, are present. So this is important because this cycle is probably the only surviving memory of the union of, frescoed memory of the union of Francesco and Bianca, because Bianca was not loved by the Grand Duke that came after, and all her coat of arms were erased and cancelled. So one thing, interesting thing, is that she was the nephew of the Grimani Palace. So there is a link, even if we are moving around European cities, but she was the nephew of the Grimani family. And so being a Venetian patrician, which is quite rare as a marriage in Florence. And the cycle was probably painted on the occasion also of this marriage. And the wish for a fertile generation is one of the reasons that can explain the preponderance of the erotic themes, often expressed through ingenious iconographic inventions. A complex image discourse here you have Bianca with the son, who was supposed to be the next Grand Duke, but then he didn't because Francesco's brother came. And a complex image discourse that follows the quaternary rhythm of the waltz corresponds to the long journey. The subjects of a vast decorative enterprise present an exclusively secular character. Myths and allegories are constantly juxtaposed to the fantastic element with great expressive freedoms. You can see some of the four main themes. Here, the artist pursued unusual iconographic solution, original, licentious, allusive, or explicit in their erotic content, according to the typical canon of the grotesque. We have some example of these walls now. In fact, the figurative discourse, where the playful aspect, the quest for the marvelous and the monstrous seem to prevail, is not focused on a single narrative or historical or mythological character, but is immediately perceived as multiple, varied, superabundant. The myriad of figurations that unfold in a path of about 150 meters cause disorientations in those who search for direction. It's really difficult to understand or grasp. You grasp this multitude of beautiful figures, or maybe their contents being often very playful, but really have to study and in depth if you want to understand the whole of the contents. It seems impossible to grasp a thematic path, but there is a very strong thematic path. Because despite this multitude of vacillating, vague, masked images, they display an obvious iconographic indicators. Placed within the circle at the focal point of each ceiling, as you've seen in the examples I gave you, each vault has a focal point in the center. Can be a circle or a square. And these are mainly allegorical figures. And myths or symbol, and they have singular attributes placed on the head, on the limbs, on their bodies and clothes. And these attributes make them look very extravagant, so they are similar to the oniric creatures that surround them. The theme proposed by the central figures is related to the other allegories and or myths located in the other main points of the ceiling. They create a net in each vault. And so as to form networks or symmetrical and or opposite conceptual links in each page. For example, I'll give you an example. This is amicizia. You have to believe me when I say this is this and this is that, because I don't have the time to explain why all the sources of the literary and iconographical sources make us know for sure, in this case, that the central figure is amicizia. She is French. And on the short side, there are two beautiful figures, and they are true friendship and false friendship because of their attributes. Right? The yellow maiden is has a multicolored dress, white, blonde, and chestnut hair, and she's unstable. Okay, this makes her a bad and deceitful figure. She's ambiguous and deceptive in nature, and also there are vipers burning in the flames around her. So she must be the negative one. The other one, beautiful one, she shows us breath. She shows truth. And all the masks around her, around them, for example, I don't know if you see it because it's not big enough probably, but the masks that are here, they look badly at her. They have very bad expressions. They relate with the subject of this part of the fresco, and this happens very, very often. So the fantastic creatures relate with the myths and allegories that are related that are present in the frescoes in a very complex and playful dialogue. So the image's enigmatic play reveals itself to the understanding as soon as the viewer can guess the common thread that links them. Pulling one corner aside of this thread, the figures are revealed one after the other, as if by removing a veil, invoking a feeling of wonder. However, their ambiguous and elusive and polysemic nature is never completely exhausted, and in their interpretation, there always remains a feeling of vagueness. I have some examples of the monsters and masks that you can find. They really are so multiple. For example, masks, and you see two figures that they are probably portraits of some court members. One is depicted as King Mida, with donkey ears and crown. The other one is just a female. And there are proverbs displayed. This woman is crying over spilled milk. And there are licentious images like this one. This is a pattern that comes from the medieval manuscripts. Other very licentious images. This man is spitting over his image in the mirror while masturbating himself. And this one also is doing something to his monster aside. And also other proverbs or emblematic images that come from repertoire of emblems. These are two blind figures. One is carried by the dog, while the other one is carrying a crippled man on his shoulders. So he's guided by the cripple. And this is a theme that you can find in emblematic literature of prudence, again, of a very prudent behavior. Also, there are other figures coming from the court. For example, we don't know, but this is surely a portrait of someone painted as an idol figure with the two animals. They speak about his temperament being idle and licentious, vicious, because of the animal is porcupine and pork. Also, a woman meeting a man, that is also another figure. And of course, wine is always present. Satires, they are playfully exchanging wine. Again, licentious. These are just some examples, but to have you, to make you feel what is this net of significance that you find, together with the mythological and allegorical net, which is also it's very important. And this is at the end of the cycle, is a very important figure because it represents the melancholic temperament. He is doing the very famous gesture of the melancholy, that is this. He's holding his head with his hand, and he's covered because he's cold, he's a Saturnian temperament, and he has black, he's the only figure that has a black surrounding, because he's governed by the black bile. And in the same vault, other figures, they play with this aspect. For example, you find this little character here, and he's holding his hand, or another little mask there, who is looks very little bit angry, like the temperament should be sad, angry, lonely, and with a black figure. And also this one here, this one just behind, he has this face is an embodiment of the melancholic characteristics. So, I've lost my... Here we are. Now, we go back to this draft, and in the first 8 ceilings, so just to give you the main themes, the first 8 ceilings, they deal with the themes of dynastic celebration, with the presence of heraldic symbols of the Medici family, such as the lily, the balls, of course, there are balls. Balls are the main iconographical element of Medici coat of arms, and they are everywhere. The crown and the scepter. Starting from the 9th, on the other hand, the prevailing subjects are cosmological nature, so they deal with the figure of Mother Nature, Goddess Nature, the harmony of the cosmos, the main stars, the deities responsible for health, and the 4 temperaments. Following these, we find concepts related to love and marriage. As I told you, these are very important, including eros, the allegories of the individual and the couple, the coat of arms of the Grand Dukes, the genealogy of the gods, the victory of lovers, Francesco and Bianca's emblems, fame, and the goddess of virginity, who presides over union and births. Finally, starting from the 25th bay, triads of virtues and vices dominate the second part of the corridor. Here we observe a peculiar conceptual dynamic. The central ceiling of each group of 3 bays depicts an allegorical concept that mediates between the 2 opposite extremes presented on the adjacent bays, thus undertaking a tempering function towards the allegorical images that surround it. Such a conceptual machinery includes representation of vices that represent a good occasion to figure comic and allusive situation. For example, we have one of these triads is temperance, which mediates the 2 extremes of hunger and gluttony. And here we have hunger in the center and temperance, doing her gesture of mixing, and with the 4 seasons and other elements, and then gluttony with many, many representations of cooks, wines, and banquets. To find sources of such complex iconographical machinery and its multiple significance layers, we can also look at theaters and festival performances. Let's begin with the festivals, which constitute one of the principal iconographic sources of the fresco cycle. Several personifications of the Uffizi ceilings are in fact inspired by the Mascherata degli Dei dei Gentili, Masquerade of the Gods of the Gentiles, the allegorical procession that paraded through the streets of Florence in February 1566, on the occasion of the marriage of Francesco I and John of Austria, the first marriage. Some allegories derive precisely from the Mascherata, and I will give you some examples. So these masks, their costumes, they were drawn by the same painters who worked in this cycle. And of course, the links are evident if you look at the attributes of the mask. This is a figure of pecunia, Geld, money, and she holds the instruments to make coins, and she has an owl on her head, exactly the same attributes that were given to the mask that walked in the procession. For example, again, we have toil, fatica. Fatica has donkey ears, crane wings on the head, and crane's leg in the left hand. The same attributes as the mask. Again, the goddess Antevorta. She's a beautiful goddess who she represents the capacity of knowing what is good to do in the future. Antevorta. She has a lamp for this theme and a sieve, because she has to choose. She has to choose the right thing to do. And the figure in the masks had a lamp and a sieve. And she's also characterized, if we don't see this in the drawing, but in the fresco, by ants, while Pecunia was characterized by cicadas. So there are always also these puns joking about on proverbs and way of saying. Other examples, this is the chariot. This, you can see the difference of the painters. This is the Antonio Tempesta. And the chariot of the sun with a flame, with a heart that doesn't never burn, that burns without quenching. Okay, this one, and of course the animals are the same. And this is also, this is the 22nd bay where the emblem of Francesco I and Bianca are intertwined. At the center there is the Aries, who is Francesco's zodiac sign, and these four emblems are both his and hers, and they are accompanied by four figures of the sky that are again this is Polo, I think. Yes, yeah. And again, Atlas is depicted as a Moor with the sky in his hand and a white band round his head. And while Polo, dressed in blue with a ball in his hand and a vase that throws out sparks. On the other hand, among the multiple activities held in the surroundings of the Corridore, were starting a year after it had been painted with fresco, Francesco gathered works of art and artists' workshops, fabulous cabinets of curiosities for him and his wife, and laboratories for him and his son. Among these activities, there were also two theaters. So, of course, as I told you before, there is a very strong link with the Mascherata, this procession, and it is very probable that the inventor of that iconographic program participated also in this fresco cycle, because there are really many similarities. But there are links also with real theater. The big theater, the very famous Medici Theater, was here in this very big hall. What we have, what is remained is only the door with Francesco I bust. In fact, the big hall of the Florentine guilds, existing inside the building of the Uffizi, was transformed into the theater with representations of L'Amico Fido in 1586 for the marriage of Alfonso d'Este and Virginia de' Medici. And of course, as happened with the Mascherata, the subjects of the representations shared the same language of the iconographical program of the ceilings, having been originated in the same intellectual background. For example, in the intermezzi of the Amico Fido, presented themes very common in literature, like the Golden Age, the city of Dite, Juno and Aris, and these are also themes that you can find in the fresco. This is Astrea, which is a protagonist of the Golden Age, the city of Dites. There is a vault dedicated to Juno and Iris. Of course, these themes are they are very common in literature, so the two can share such themes. The representation also of the Muses is at the key point of the loggia. It is in the first bay or the last, because you could use this corridor, of course, coming from the Palazzo Pitti and going to Palazzo Vecchio in this way, or from Palazzo Vecchio to Palazzo Pitti. So, and there was a door here, and here began the cycle. And the Muses are just here, the first or the last, as you wish. So the representation of the Muses at the key point of the loggia is entirely consistent with the role and the iconographic tradition of the goddesses. Shortly thereafter, the contest between the Muses and the Pieris, which is represented here in the two squares, was staged during the famous interludes of the Pellegrina, the second theatrical work represented in the Uffizi Theatre on the occasion of Ferdinando I and Cristina di Lorena's wedding. Of that famed representation, there remains a drawing by Pontalenti and an engraving by Epifanio d'Alfiano. If the language of the mythology and allegory hidden under the figurative discourse of the grotesque is shared with the representation of power, such as festivals and shows performed in occasion of princely marriages, the corridor cycle, with its licentious and fantastic images, has also a strong link with a more popular kind of theater. In fact, the gallery also served as road to reach the big room where the actors of the Commedia dell'arte play their shows, the so-called Teatro della Dogana or di Baldracca, here. So there were, again, they could come from Palazzo Pitti and go to this other theater. And we have a very beautiful quote by an ambassador describing the Grand Duke going to the theater. I'll read in Italian and then translate because the Italian is more effective. Il Granduca è stato tutta questa settimana molto infreddato, con una tosse fastidiosa. La cagione viene attribuita allo star tanto a passeggiare per questa sua nuova galleria, della quale par che si compiaccia sommamente, ornandola di pitture e di statue a meraviglia. Ma io credo che gli nuoca più l'andar spesso come fa a Zanni, perché uscito di quel gran caldo, sulle 4 ore passa all'aria un lungo cammino per detta galleria. So the Grand Duke was sick this week, having caught a bad cold and a cough. The reason is thought to be in his walking so much in his new gallery that he likes so much, and is decorating with wonderful paintings and statues. But I believe that going to Zanne is worse for him, because when he goes out of that very hot place, he goes in the air for a long walk through the gallery. And Zanne, of course, is the mask. And this is very interesting. So we can know how much he was interested in this theater that was probably born during his reign, because it started its representation in 1576. And there were hidden, of course, stanzini, hidden places from which he could see. But he went in that hot place, so it must have been a real participation. And of course, the playful and licentious puns and jokes of the Commedia dell'arte played in such a near theater could be a source of inspiration for the fresco cycle too. And this is a topic that must be still be explored, because I believe that this cycle, compared to other cycles, other grotesque cycles of the period, is really very, very licentious. The erotic themes are very preponderant. You don't find such images usually, not of some, I mean some, but man masturbating himself is not very common at this time. 1581. It's just the period, this moment, the very important text about grotesques were written and condemning them. So this is also an answer to that conceptual debate. The vast cycle of grotesques in the Eastern Corridor, with its semantic and iconic stratification, where the high and the low play to reveal each other mutually, reflects the cultural complexity of the Mannerist court and constitutes a true mirror of the multiple activities and aspirations of the prince. Thank you.